do.
Because they're scared of the stuff.
So they think, oh yeah, and that mix it up with everybody else. Well, they do really. They do have jobs in there. Although tomorrow's going to be quite windy as well. So it is
I was
quite
concerned
windy.
with it, yeah.
We did it after this morning, so.
I'm going to try again, so welcome everybody to the Overview and Scrutiny meeting tonight, which is the first call-in we've had for 2 years and 11 months. The last call-in was February 2017. So any apologies for absence?
No.
Excellent. Any declarations of interest? Thank you. I assume no change to the order of business. And just to say that this meeting has been recorded, and I'd just like to make one small statement before we go to the opening of the meeting. You may agree with me, you may not, but this is my opinion only. The first duty of a councillor is to do what he or she thinks is right and necessary for Ipswich. His or her second duty is to the residents we represent, and then only after these duties are discharged do we have a duty to our party. I shall therefore assume that all here want what is best for Ipswich, regardless of party, and vigorous questioning of the executive will come from all sides. So in front of us we have the call-in for 4 College Street. I'd like to a very warm welcome to the Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder, Councillor Ellesmere, and the Lead Signatory and the Leader of the Conservative Group on the Council, Councillor Fisher. And very warm welcome to Martin Fulsher and Mark Hunter. So before we start the official meeting tonight, because it's been such a long time since we've had a call-in, I thought it might be helpful just to go through the order of proceedings for the call-in. I hope you won't be too bored with what I'm going to read out. So as you know, the Executive's decision relating to 4 College Street has been called in. The reasons given for the call-in, which the committee needs to consider, are: were the 4 options in the original report given fair consideration? And was the Executive's decision based on sound judgment? The Overview and Scrutiny Committee will need to decide whether the Executive's decision should stand, or if it should be referred back to Executive, either with a debate at Council beforehand to inform Executive's decision, or without a Council debate. I will first ask the committee to confirm the scope for the call-in, which has been tabled. I will then ask the Lead Signatory, Councillor Fisher, to present his case for the call-in and why we, the committee, should scrutinise the decision, and Councillor Fisher, you will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes. I will then ask the Leader of the Council to present the reasons why the decision was made by Executive, and again, Councillor Ellesmere, you will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes. The committee will then be given the opportunity to question the Lead Signatory and the Portfolio Holder. The committee will then be given the opportunity to ask officers or any other witnesses to provide further information and to answer questions. If there is any new or additional information that comes to light, further questions may be asked of the Lead Signatory and the Portfolio Holder. The Lead Signatory and the Portfolio Holder will then be asked to summarise their cases within a 5-minute timescale. At the conclusion of these summaries, both councillors will then leave the meeting, along with any members of the Executive, as they must not take part in any debate on the course of action to be taken. Once the debate has taken place, I will then ask the committee to take one of the following courses of action: to refer the decision back to Executive, to refer the decision to Council to debate the observations of this meeting, and Council will then be required to refer the decision back to Executive. Any motion must be proposed and seconded, and only one motion can be debated at any one time. If that motion is lost, the committee can continue with other options available to us until all are exhausted, and then the original decision will be upheld and implemented immediately by default. Should we resolve to refer the matter to Executive or Council, then we must agree our observations as to why it is being referred back. I hope that helps, and Ainsley has very kindly given you a short summary of what I've just said. So if we could turn to the papers in front of us, and you do have as the first paper the notice of the call-in, and I do need to have a proposer for that, please. For the scope, I do beg your pardon, I always forget to say that. Thank you, Councillor Penn.
I think the first bullet point on the scope, just going on the minutes of the executive that we've seen, they don't seem to have debated all four of the options in any depth, and therefore, if the first one stands, the second one must stand by process. So if you don't debate or look at the
Yeah, I only really need you to propose.
I propose a second.
Yes, you may stay on that case. So could I ask for a second, please? Thank you very much. May we use first names, or are you going to object to that?
Whichever's fine with me. First name.
First name is okay with
So
me.
much nicer, isn't it? So the scope has been agreed, so I'm now going to ask the lead signatory, Ian, to present the case for the call-in and why the committee should scrutinise the decision, and this will be up to a maximum of 10 minutes, which Ainsley is going to time.
Thank you, Chair. Parts of number 4 College Street date back to 1590, a time when Elizabeth I reigned England and just 2 generations on from Thomas Wolsey exerting his great influence over the country. This house was in its early years as pilgrims left the port of Ipswich to emigrate to the colony of New England, a time when Ipswich was a vitally important port both for the region and the country. Although the building is in a state of disrepair, it remains as one of the most historic buildings within the town and a complete example of our town's historic waterfront. Once the regeneration of the area is completed, it will stand alone, a monument of our proud history set against the waterfront skyline shaping our exciting future. We are extremely lucky to have such an important building within our ownership. We have a duty to our town to protect and preserve this building and to ensure that it stands for centuries to come. We also have a duty to ensure we highlight this building in an appropriate manner, befitting its historic value and as an asset to the town. Too often we do not control some of the more important buildings within our town, so to have ownership of 4 College Street is both an honour and a responsibility. When I saw the recent exec papers for the first time, my concerns were that we were doing something as uninspiring as turning it into an office, but mostly the cost and the statement that the project wouldn't break even. I then looked more into the history of the building and came to appreciate the value of this and what a bonus it was for this to be ours. I began to think of the possible future uses for the building and how we could do something better than just some more office space. I found an Ipswich Star report after this was first brought to the Executive in August 2014. It detailed the Council's intention to purchase the site and that there was to be a design competition to find a new use for the site. Councillor Ellesmere was quoted as saying, "Any redevelopment will have to retain the near derelict lodge at the junction of College Street and Bridge Street, and this will be incorporated into the new entrance, possibly as a waterfront visitor centre, showing people what there is to see in the area." He went on to say, "We want a stunning development there to provide a worthy entrance to the waterfront opposite the historic St Peter's Church." None of this was raised in the recent exec paperwork, and I would not have known unless I did my own research, so I began to think what other information may be available that I, as a member of the executive, should have known before coming to the decisions we were asked to. And a call-in was the only option available to me to inquire on this matter. I think I can show that both the statements I make in the scope are true, and as a result will urge this committee to refer the decision back to executive for further consideration with debate at a full council meeting. The first option was to bring the building back into a viable state as soon as possible. This was the option recommended by officers. It was not stated that this may have the negative effect of actually costing more when a different usage of the other 3 options. Not that the option's any good, but it just wasn't that bad. Option 2 was to do minimal works but enough to justify its removal from the at-risk register. The main reason given for not choosing option 2 was that it would require further work into the future, which would not be as cost effective as doing it all in one go. This claim is untrue based on the figures used in the report. These numbers are based on the construction cost estimate completed by the Daniel Connell Partnership, and they clearly state at 3.1 in their report that the costs are based on the 3 packages of work being completed at separate times. Option 3 was to await resolution of all issues associated with the master plan before resolving the future of the building. The main reason given for not considering this option was that there is not considered to be any advantage of waiting an unknown amount of time for the wider site issues to be resolved, particularly as the building will continue to deteriorate. But the condition survey by NJ Architects clearly states within their executive summary the following. Number 4 College Street is generally weathertight and secure from intruders. In these terms, despite its general air of neglect, the house is not at any immediate risk. The building had been unoccupied for 39 years since 1981 and has been on the at-risk register for 28 years since 1992. There is absolutely no evidence in the condition survey that the building will deteriorate if immediate action is not taken. In fact, if there was, then we should be concerned that the survey was undertaken 20 months ago in May 2018. The fourth option was to do nothing, but this was never really a viable option as there is a commitment to get the building off the at-risk register. I think there is a very important fifth option, one which I see as the best and only sensible way forward and one which was not considered in the executive report. That is, to do the works necessary to take the building off the at-risk register and to make a commitment to undertake further work once the master plan is completed. This seems to me to be the most sensible option but was not even considered. The work could be done immediately to take the building off the at-risk register, and the work to bring the building to a viable state could take place at a later date for no additional cost to those reported, and the final usage will fit with the site master plan. I think this all goes to outline how none of the options were given the correct consideration using the correct evidence. The officers made their recommendation based on the false information that the work needs to take place immediately to avoid further costs, and options 2 and 3 were dismissed for reasons which I have shown to be false. Finally, what seems to be the most sensible option was not even considered. I believe that this goes to show that the options were not given fair consideration. Now, regarding the assumption that the decision was not based on sound judgment, I do not see this as a decision as a political one. Regardless of where we all sit on the political spectrum, I am sure that we all want to see the best future for our town, although we may have different ideas as to how we may achieve this. It goes without saying that judgment is mostly subjective. We can have different predicted outcomes without there being a lack of sound judgment. And I do not wish this to be an attack on the judgment of the Executive Committee. My concern is that the information provided to the committee did not allow its members to make an informed decision based on sound judgment. So I refer to the exec report and section 2 about the background of the site. It makes no mention of the council's stated intention to hold a design competition for the site master plan, and it also makes no mention of Councillor Ellesmere's previous commitments and stated intentions for the site. Most exec reports contain information from previous exec reports, allowing the reader to reference previous discussions, and a list of papers that may contain information important and relevant to the current paper. For some reason, none were mentioned despite this building being a subject in 3 separate previous executive papers. This does not allow members to make a decision formed by sound judgment. The finance section of the report lists the costs of the project with a total value of £423,000. At no point is it mentioned that only £35,000 is needed to get the building off the at-risk register. This is only 8% of the total project costs, which makes this a really important piece of information when making a decision as to the best course of action. For me, this is one of the most vital pieces of info that was missing from the whole exec report, and critical to be able to ascertain if one of the options was viable. Whilst introducing the report at the exec meeting, Councillor Ellesmere explained that significant work was required to protect the building. This goes against the general view from the professionals who conducted the condition survey. He went on to state it was considered that doing additional works to bring 4 College Street into a condition whereby it could be let as offices would provide the best value. How can a project that identifies itself as not breaking even be considered to be best value? And how can the committee decide this if they were unaware of the small cost for the urgent work? Councillor Ellesmere explained that the master plan for the remainder of the site was still being developed and that a permanent use would be determined along with that. This admits that in all likelihood the building may change usage in the near future, another reason to wait to complete the works. I then noted that there was the potential for additional money to be spent once the master plan had been completed and a new usage suggested. But Councillor Ellesmere noted that the building was at risk and so works needed doing quickly. But there is no suggestion in the condition survey that significant work needs undertaking immediately. There is no suggestion that the building is at risk, so this information is incorrect. The discussions that took place did nothing to provide the relevant info needed to base the decision on sound judgment. Councillor Ellesmere repeated the mistake that immediate work needed undertaking urgently and that costs would be higher if all packages of the work were not completed at the same time. Because of the lack of this information, I do not believe the decision of the executive was based on sound judgment, but only because the information was not present to allow a sound decision to be made. This building should and could become one of the focal points to highlight the historic nature of our newly developed waterfront, a beacon showing the importance of our town in times past. And it's for all these reasons that I urge the committee to give serious consideration to asking for this decision to be referred back to executive after a debate at full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. David.
Listed building in poor condition that came with the purchase of the recent site at the entrance to the waterfront. It is, despite what Councillor Fisher just said, on the building's at-risk register and it is currently uninhabitable. The executive report proposed to undertake works to improve the structure of the building, make it weatherproof, etc., and to ensure it is taken off the building's at-risk register. It also proposed to go further and undertake some work which is the minimum required to be able to get it back into use, mainly providing utilities including heating, creating a new entrance at the rear, toilets on the ground floor. There were 4 options presented to executive. Now, at that meeting, there was agreement from everyone present, including Councillor Fisher, to discount 2 of them. Option 3, wait for everything to be sorted out before doing anything, and option 4, do nothing. There were reasons given for those options, and they were not seriously considered by any of the councillors because of the disadvantages of them which were presented in the report. Now, the reason for the call-in is the difference between 2 options which were debated. One was option 1, bring the building back into a viable state as soon as practically possible, and option 2, do minimal works but enough to justify its removal from the building at risk register. I am struggling to see how this new option 5 that Councillor Fisher has just introduced is different from option 2, which is because that if we did the minimal works, we would of course then go on in future to come to a final use for the building. So that is not a different option. And the executive's view was that we should go for option 1. The vast majority of the works proposed in option 1 are things that will have to be done regardless of the future usage of the building. Getting utilities to the site, putting heating in, data cabling, heat and sound insulation, asbestos strip out, levelling floors, the need to provide a ground floor toilet, and the need to provide a new entrance at the rear. The entrance at the front onto College Street is extremely narrow. You don't get a sense of that from walking past it because there's a board over it. The door is much narrower. It is not acceptable in a modern building for DDA compliance. So whatever happens, if the building is going to be brought back into use, there needs to be work done to create a new entrance at the rear of it. So the building is not habitable without these works taking place. And it is difficult to imagine any use of the building, any use at all, that wouldn't require those works to be undertaken. So they are the minimum that will need to be done to ensure that the building can be occupied. And it is much more likely that we'll get someone to take on the building if we do those works now. When tenants are looking potential tenants are looking for a building, their requirement is usually in the short to medium term, And the more that needs doing to a building to enable them to occupy it, the more risk there is, and therefore the more risk averse they become, and the more difficult it becomes to find a tenant. So if we do this, we are more likely to get an occupier of the building, and the sooner we get the property occupied, the better. It reduces the need for security. While a building is not occupied, it can be subject to break-ins, it can be subject to fires, and this is something that has happened to this building in the past. In the upper floors, there is significant fire damage from when it was broken into before we took ownership of it. Occupation also means that the building will be heated and therefore won't deteriorate after the urgent works are undertaken. We can do the works, but if the building is still left there empty, there is a danger that it will deteriorate further, and we'll have to do more works. And it also means that we will be getting some income to help towards the considerable but necessary cost of renovating this important building. Now, none of that would be the case if we just did the minimum of urgent works, and we need to be realistic here. We are moving ahead on this whole development. We got planning permission for the Gecko building last week. We're going to move ahead with that. We'll then move on to the Burton's building, but we haven't identified funding for that yet. We've still got the Investec site and this site as well. It is going to be some time before the whole area is developed. So I believe it is clear that the decision taken by executive both gave all the other options fair consideration and was based on sound judgment. However, I am sorry that I don't think I can say the same about this call-in. Now, there was a disagreement about executive about this, but Councillor Fisher was very confused about what he actually wanted. He argued for doing something more ambitious, in other words, more expensive, but he also argued for not doing the additional works because that was too much money. And there also seems to be an indication that he didn't want to do anything at all. Now, it is notable that none of the other councillors who signed the call-in were actually present at this executive meeting. So they didn't hear the responses that Councillor Fisher was given to his questions, which showed that this was a perfectly sound decision. They didn't hear him simultaneously call for the council to both spend more money and less money on 4 College Street. They didn't hear his one suggestion for the building, which was an expensive visitor centre. They didn't hear his failure to supply a single example of a visitor centre that doesn't require a subsidy. And they didn't hear him say that 4 College Street, words to the effect, had been standing for 500 years, so a bit longer won't make any difference, which he did say. And it is possible that if they had heard all that, they might not have been so keen to sign Councillor Fisher's call-in notice. I can't honestly see that this call-in is any more than a fit of pique by Councillor Fisher because there was a spat over it at executive. It's a waste of everybody's time, mine, yours, the officers, even Councillor Fisher's. But more seriously, the upshot of this call-in is that we've had to delay the work of protecting this important historical building at a time of year when the weather is the worst. So I would urge Overview and Scrutiny Committee to allow the implementation of this decision immediately.
Ask the lead secretary and the portfolio holder and our 2 officers if you have any questions. Sorry. Yes, I can say that. Sorry. Councillors. Have I got any questions, please? Councillor Pope? Well, let's make a start.
Okay. Councillor Ellesmere, when were you personally aware that the cost of the works to get the building off the at-risk register were only £35,000?
Obviously, in the preparation of the report for executive, we looked into the options available, which was why we agreed there were 2 options there. One was to just do the minimum works, which is, as you said, was noted, the works are noted in the report, and then there was the about whether we should go further than that and actually try and go further and get the building back into use. I think we do need to be aware that if you're just quoting the cost of the works, there's the quite significant cost of the survey works, which have been undertaken, which have to be done regardless of whether we do the minimum work or not. So when Councillor Fisher says that we're only talking about £30,000 out of a £400,000 project, that £200,000 has to be spent on the survey works regardless of what we do. So you just need to be aware of that. But obviously we had discussions about what we should do in the preparation of the executive report.
I have got Cllr. Is your next?
Comes back directly on that one?
Yes.
And then I'll stop.
Yeah, thank you.
So the building's been on the at-risk register for 28 years, since 1992. The council have owned it since 2016. Why wasn't the survey to look into what needed to be done to save this building done earlier?
After us, officers, we, as we purchase a building, we look at what we need, or a site, we need to look at what we need to do. In terms of the timing of it, I don't know if Mr. Dunfer or Mr. Fulcher.
It's sat in bad weather for 2 years whilst we've owned it. We've not done anything since May.
Your question's been asked.
I would say that's not an argument for doing nothing now, though, is it?
No, I'm trying to clarify the chronology.
I'm assuming that we carried a survey out once we owned the property. We had an idea that we would work in site generally.
Could you just use
Sorry.
the mic?
We instructed the survey once we had a better idea what we were doing on the whole site. So there was discussions around master plan, and the quotations, etc. for this took a little while. I couldn't tell you the exact date when we instructed the survey. I can find that out for you if you wish.
Can I start with Colette, please?
Thank you. Don't really know who to ask this question to. Can I ask both? So it's about the at-risk register. What authority is the at-risk register? Who collates that? Is it a national heritage thing that decides? And we would hope that if it is something that's national, that they would know what they're talking about. So it's either at risk or it isn't. And if this is the body that decides what's at risk and what isn't, then we should probably listen to it.
Mr. Fulcher is probably best placed to answer this.
Fulcher is.
So, English Heritage, obviously involved with listing of buildings and advising. The at-risk register is Suffolk-wide, so all the local authorities in Suffolk contribute towards it and identify those buildings. And obviously this one has been identified for some time as being at risk, which it remains to this day.
Thank you. Tim.
Yes, looking at the conditions report, there are a number of identified things which come in at category A, but actually disturbingly, looking at the conditions report, there are unknowns as well, which suggested to me that until you get into the building and start looking at those areas, you might well be talking about other costs which are necessary to make the building safe and bring it into a state of other than dereliction. And I couldn't see any reason why we shouldn't be getting in there to try and make the place secure, particularly because I was worried about the unknowns.
And that is, you'll note in paragraph 8.1 of the initial report, there is a significant contingency element to the budget, which is always prudent today in any project, but in particular with listed buildings, old buildings, because as you say, until you start to sort of lift the cover, you don't necessarily always know what you're going to find.
You wanted to come in?
Just on the reply there, because Councillor President, yes, there is contingency in the report. Those figures are lifted from that report from the Daniel Connell partnership. That's already 2 years out of date, so it's a good chance that contingency is going to be eaten up in those, in the fact that inflation would have pushed those costs up already, because the figures that are contained in the report are from May 2018.
Any more questions, please? Yes, Sandra. Mrs. Griffiths.
David, you mentioned the possibility of starting to get a return on this building if we get it into a state where somebody could move in and start occupying it. And that could happen much sooner if we get this work done ASAP and could start to create a return rather than wait until the rest of the whole area was developed. Have you got any feel for how much difference in terms of time we're talking about here? Because it seems to me that we've got quite a long lead in before the rest of the site is developed, and so we could potentially have many months of occupation if we hurry up and get this work done now.
Well, that's certainly the case. I wouldn't like to put a timescale on it, but as I indicated, we're following a definite strategy of trying to regenerate this area. From the outset, this was 3 different sites. They were in different ownerships. Simply put, there were receivers, there were Irish banks, there were huge liabilities worth debts on buildings worth way more than they're worth. It's taken a huge amount of work to actually recover the 3 sites from this and bring them into one ownership, in the council's ownership, and we're now working through bringing them back into use. So the Gecko project, which we got planning permission for, that is a significant project. That's currently the only one that we've got fully funded. We've got outline planning permission for the Burton's building, and we'll be looking for funding for that to bring that back into use. But again, that's additional time on top of that. We can't even get into the Paul's silo because that's full of pigeon guano, asbestos, and goodness knows what else. So we're currently procuring a very specialised operation to get that cleared out, so we can even do the survey work on that to decide what we can actually do with that silo. So and it's not going to, until we've sort of moved through that bit, we're not going to be coming forward with a final scheme for the rest of the site, where the temporary car park and and 4 College Street is. So it is likely that it will be many years before we actually do this. If we do this work to 4 College Street, I can't guarantee we'll get an occupier immediately, but we have had some interest in it. But I'll tell you now, anybody who goes and walks in there will just walk straight back out again. And you've seen the photos of it. It is in a terrible state. We need to get it into a better state so that people can imagine what it might be like to go in there, and then I think we've got a chance. But the council, we've got a lot of external funding for this, but we've put a lot of the council taxpayers' money into getting these sites back into use. It is highly unlikely with 4 College Street that we will make our money back from this, certainly not anytime soon. So the sooner we start to get a return on it and get some income, the better. But there are also benefits, as I've outlined in my statement, in actually getting it occupied, which will help preserve it in future.
Something we want to make sure that our committee understood that I'm not speaking about waiting until the development is finished. It's until the master plan is finished. And I believe your question asked roughly how long, and I don't believe we've got an answer for that. I would have thought that the master plan as it's being worked on is a matter of months away. Right? I'm not talking about not doing it. I just want to make sure that it fits in with whatever the master plan comes up with. That was all my concern. Not to wait till the master plan is developed and then spend some money on the building. Wait till we see the master plan so that we can ensure that whatever we do with the building, it fits with the wider site. Because we have made a commitment in this exec report that this, and I know I'm saying it's a historic asset, and of course it's a historic asset to our town, but we are only seeing this as generating an income as part of the wider site. So it is part of the wider site, it isn't a standalone building. So that's why I see the importance of just waiting to see what the site master plan is. Once we know And I don't understand how come we don't know when the site master plan is going to come to fruition.
We're going to answer that.
I am. Thank you, Chair. As I think I outlined, we can't get into the pool silo to undertake survey work. We've got no idea whether that structure is able to be adapted for whatever it may be, probably housing, or whether it will have to come down. If it comes down, there will be big demolition costs, there will be big archaeological costs, and then the cost of rebuilding should we do anything. It is impossible to do a master plan for this area until we know what we're going to do, or what we can do with that silo. And as I think I've indicated, this is a really specialist operation to enable us to clear that out. And once we've done that, which will take some time, we will then have to do the survey work. And it's only once we've done that that we will be able to determine the master plan for the area. So it isn't going to be done in the next couple of months for very sound reasons that we don't know what we can do with that silo yet.
Sorry, you want to come back to that?
Well, I have a second question if I may.
Well, I have got other speakers, so may I ask? So I'm going to go to Colin next.
Thank you, Chair. And it does follow on slightly from that, thankfully. So it's a listed building. This is a question to Councillor Fisher, and hopefully the officers can provide a bit of clarity. It's a listed building, which means that it has to, any work that gets done to it has to abide by very strict, historically faithful, appreciation of keeping the building as intact as possible. So my question is really about the ambition for the site. The word ambition that I'm picking up on that you said. What beyond the proposal would undermine any further ambition with that site, given how restrictive it is for a listed building and what can be used for? I understand that bringing it up to a standard by which an occupier can come in a more sort of smooth way, how it might undermine any future ambition that can be done with the building. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. So obviously, yes, you're correct. As a listed building, there's only certain things you can do to the building, but there are other potential uses for the building. I'm more concerned with the overall usage of the building to ensure that whatever usage we choose fits in the site. But like I said with the call in the beginning, I'm not here. I've obviously got my own opinions of what I think would look good on the site, and that's a visitor centre. Okay, that was the idea that the council had when they first purchased the site. That was the idea that they released to the press, and that was the idea that they put in their initial report. I think that's a good idea. I know there's a cost attached to that, but then there's a cost attached to making it into an office. Because we have to remember that this, if we make it into an office, it's going to lose money. So there's a cost attached to making it into an office. The money that Councillor Rosemary says we're going to get in won't cover the costs of the building. So what I'm kind of saying is, I'm not here to tell everybody what they should put, what that usage should be for. I'm saying that I think the information that we had and the information that we were given and the information in the report didn't allow the executive to make the right decision. So yes, I'm agreed, there's only a it's a small building, there's only a very limited things that you can do with the actual envelope, but there's quite a few different options you could choose for the inside of what you actually do to the building, and that's my concern. I think regardless of what the final usage is, the outside of the building is going to look pretty similar, I believe, because it has to look in a certain way. I'll defer to the officers there, but I'm pretty sure there's not much you can do to the outside of that building. You couldn't choose to turn it into something that it isn't. So it's more concerned with the usage rather than what it looks like.
Thank you. Sheila.
I need some clarification, really, I think. I mean, looking at option 1 and 2, it seems to me that whichever option we take, we're going to end up moving to the same place with regard to the building. We're going to do the same set of work to make it a viable proposition. Now, if that's the case, my question is, why would we do it in two chunks, where the second chunk is going to happen sometime in the future? I know from work that I've had done on my house that by doing it in two chunks, I end up paying more for the overall work that is done. So my question is, why would we not take the opportunity to complete both pieces of work as soon as possible?
Thank you. Well, I agree. I've had works on my house before, and yeah, that's similar to what I found. But I'm relying on the information that we were supplied within this call-in document. There was a condition survey undertaken, and then there was price work done by a firm of quantity surveyors. They've specifically priced the work to be done at separate times. So it's already taken into account that the packages are separate and will have different costs attached to them, and and we've lifted those costs from that report and put them directly in the executive report. So I don't deny that something is probably cheaper if you do it all in one go, but the figures that we've been given here within this call-in report at the Daniel Condell Partnership here in their summary at 3.1, it states these costs are for the works to be completed at separate times. So that's the first one, the cost. Now, yes, I agree. Well, option 1 and option 2 don't, and that was my thing. Option 1 and option 2 don't bring you to the same place, because option 2 is to do minimal works but enough to justify its removal from the building at risk register. It says nothing further about then doing more in the future. And that was why I said there should be another option, option 5, which that was. I'm all in favour of doing the work now. My only reason for not wanting to go ahead and spend and commit all the money now was because we've admitted in the executive report that this will only be financially viable as part of the wider site. The wider site is currently having a master plan being worked on. So I said, so my opinion is, let's get the building off the at-risk register and not commit more money until we know what the master plan is. Now, Councillor Ellesmere has openly admitted that there's a good chance that once the master plan is developed, a different usage for the site may be come across, in which case we then might need to spend, and we've turned it into an office, we then might need to spend more money on that. So I don't think, using the figures as explained here, I don't think that doing the work in separate tranches will cost any more, because that's what these figures say. I'm not a professional, I have to go by the information I'm given, and that is what the information in this report states. So I don't see the reason, and because we won't be turning it into an office and making lots of money, we'll still be losing money. I don't see, and it's such an important building, that's why I want to wait between the two times of getting the work, the urgent work done now, and then waiting for the master plan to be developed to find a permanent usage for the building, rather than a usage now and then a potential another usage when the master plan is done. Because
I think Councillor Fisher's got this fundamental misconception that the works that are proposed in option 1 are going to cut off future options. They're not. There's something that we would have to do for anything that we're going to be doing in future. So getting utilities into the building, what future use will not require utilities into the building? Ensuring that there are there's heating in all the floors. What future use of the building is not going to require heating to be installed? Data cabling, whether it's an office or whether it's a visitor centre, what future use is not going to require data cabling? Proper modern heat insulation and sound insulation, what future use is not going to require that? Stripping asbestos out, which future use is not going to require us to take asbestos out? Levelling the floors, again, doesn't matter what goes in there, the floors will need to be levelled. These are the things that we're talking about doing here. It's not these are expensive works because it is a listed building, but they are not extravagant works. They are works that need to be done regardless of what the future use of this building is, and it makes sense to do them now because we will have to do them at some point in the future. But if we do them now, then there is a chance that we can get an occupier in there, whether it's for the short term or the long term. But Councillor Fisher says, what does it matter? There's a little thing called interest. We have to borrow money for the capital programme to put things in place. If we're not getting an income back, then that interest is costing us money, and the longer that building is empty, the more it will cost us. So we do have to look at this from a business point of view, and we do need to look after the finances of the council. And our view is this is the best way to do this, to enable us to get the building to a state where it can be brought back into use, but also to preserve it. And I'll just come back to the original call-in notice that this, the suggestion that this was not based on sound judgment. I just don't think it's that sort at all. I've said, what the reasons are for us doing this, and I think they're patently obvious, because we're going to have to do this anyway. It makes sense to get on and do this. It does not make sense, as Councillor Fisher says, to believe that because the building's been stood there for 500 years, it doesn't matter if we leave it another couple of years without doing anything. I just don't agree with that.
You've got a supplementary.
If the costs for the work that Councillor Ellesmere has just outlined are included in the report that was presented to Exec, but future-proofed, does that not then mean that if the work is done along with making it watertight, etc., it will actually cost less than the predicted cost in the report?
Could you repeat that?
If we don't wait to do the second tranche of work, which is being costed as future-proof,
Yeah.
won't it actually cost us less than that future-proof figure, and therefore be a saving?
I didn't. If you got the impression it was future-proof, I didn't mean to give the impression it was future-proof. The cost. There's contingencies in the costs to allow for inflation. What I was trying to get at was that the work is in 3 packages. It's been costed in 3 packages, and those packages are individual packages. The argument in the executive paperwork was that if we don't do all this work all in one time, then it will cost more. My argument is here that was given as a reason to dismiss one of the options, but that is untrue, because their own paperwork states that it won't cost more to do all in one go. I can see where you're coming from. What I'm trying to get at there in the cost-wise is that if you...
suggested it would cost more to do all in one go. Yes. That's the opposite way round, what I was saying.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it won't be. Well, this says no. The information I've got within this call-in paperwork suggests that no, there won't be any change. But the cost. But obviously, one of my reasons for not wanting to go ahead now is that another permanent usage for the building may be found when the master plan, which is said in the minutes for the original executive meeting. Now, if we've spent, because in this executive report it says there's £108,000 to refurbish to office fit out. So we refurbish it to office fit out, we've got a tenant in there, we've got an income coming in, then we may find another usage for the site, so we're going to then have to spend further money. So that was the further money that I was talking about. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Perhaps the office is...
Yes, maybe, because also Ian did ask about fundamentally that the building at the front can't be changed, can it? And I didn't allow you time to answer.
So the external facade of the building would have to remain largely the same with repair works. In the details of the report, it talks about large ward repairs, render repairs, etc. And then obviously you'd have to decorate it to a suitable finish. So the external appearance of the building would largely remain as a house. But that's the externals. what's the next question about the total cost? So the total cost for the project, although it has been split down into 3 sections by the quantity surveyors, that's it will always be cheaper to do it as one project as a whole. You avoid inflation costs, etc. I believe the current construction inflation indices running at about 3.2% per annum. I haven't checked it recently, but there's obviously an annual inflation cost.
And tender costs, of course.
And total. Right, well, I've got several people wanting to speak that haven't spoken already. Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things of being one of the later speakers, a lot has been answered for me. It says reversion to office fab, but to me, an office is just a room where you can put a desk, it has computer access. I don't think that's hard to change as such, and it doesn't actually, it's only in that last bit, I mean, the financial considerations, the actual things that went to executive doesn't say it has to be an office, doesn't have to be an office. Is that correct, or can it just be rooms? Is that a fair?
Yeah.
So Ian wants to comment,
Well,
and I'll come back to
Yeah, but I just wanted to comment that I know the last few, obviously, questions and what we've been speaking about has been about the usage of the building. I should concentrate that that's not why I'm calling in this this decision. I mean, yes, I've got different opinions on the future usage of this building, but that's not the reason I'm calling in the decision. I know I'm not. I don't represent the party that's in power here, so I know that I don't really have any say in the future use of the building. I'm calling in the decision for the reasons obviously mentioned before. So, whether it's an office or not an office, yes, of course I'm concerned about that, and of course that's obviously part of my reasons for being interested in 4 College Street. But it's really that because of the lack of information that I've highlighted earlier, we couldn't arrive at the decision. I'm a member of the executive as well, so I feel that I couldn't arrive at the decision that I was needed to with that lack of information. That's
we're keeping it dry, we're keeping it heated, we're getting basic things, and if they're just rooms can become anything. It's not tied to an office, it can be changed into whatever the master plan is. This to me seems almost a no-brainer that we get this done and we start using it, and then any rent we get in is just a bonus, isn't it? We're not going to make the money back, but we're still going to make some money back, and that's it.
Thank you. So I'm now going round again to people. Richard, you put your hand down.
Has research been done into the cost of alternative uses other than office space?
Is that level, does it
I think that was David for the offices. Yeah, has research been done into alternative uses?
What we've done is look at the minimum we need to do to get an occupier in there. And that's what we're proposing. Now, it may be that if there is some, really whizzy new use that comes out of it, that it would need additional work on top of that as a time case. But the point I made is that whatever goes in there will need the works that we're proposing here.
Is this a supplementary?
Yeah, both of them are supplementary.
What's the vacancy rate for office space in Ipswich Borough Council area at the moment? And what happened to the idea of the visitor centre you spoke about in 2014? Doesn't seem to have been researched or looked into.
So I'd have to defer to, I don't know whether Mr. Williams knows off the top of his head the vacancy rate, but I think we need to be clear that there is different types of office accommodation available in Ipswich. So there is very cheap second-hand office accommodation, where the rent is not very much, but for new office accommodation, there is both demand and significant rents can be payable. And we've got an example, of course, because we've got the new Burkitt's building, which was a new purpose-built office, but also we've got the connection centre, which is new purpose-built office space, which is now fully occupied, and also new refurbished office space at the Maltings. So I don't know whether Mr. Williams has got the actual figure, but just looking at the global figure for vacant office space doesn't actually tell you that much. You need to look at what the class of that office space is and what the vacancy rate in there is. But Mr. Williams, I've dropped you right in it.
He likes that.
He loves that, and the basic answer to Councillor Ellesmere's question is no, I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but realistically, this is a small building that, irrespective of its use, is going to be a small floor space and won't make any significant difference to the quantum of office floor space in the town, if it were to be offices either short-term or longer-term, but it may be of interest to a particular business because of its location or its characteristics or various other features specific to it.
What was your second question?
Sorry.
Supplementary.
Yeah, so Councillor Ellesmere in the Ipswich Star in 2014 said that he'd like to turn the building into a visitor centre. I was wondering what happened to that vision and why no research was done into that.
I think that was really answered once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a visitor centre is a nice idea, but they cost money, and it is, you know, there's not been any indication that of any grant funding or anything that we could get for it, and you know, we are having our funding cut year on year by the government, and it's going to continue to get cut. So we're not in the game at the moment of putting in new facilities which are going to cost us, which are going to require a subsidy rather than potentially bringing income to the council.
I'm going to move to Sol.
My question's been answered.
Thank you. Colette.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Councillor Fisher. So you keep mentioning that the call-in was more about the options not being given fair consideration at the executive meeting, and that the decision was not based on sound judgment. What information do you feel that you needed at that meeting to have made a decision that you would have been happy with?
Thank you. So, the information I got after I did the calling, I got the condition survey, got the explanation from Martin Fulcher, I had the quantity surveyor's report. That information was, I think, really important. That gave, it was that information that told me most of the things that I brought up this evening. It was that information that actually highlighted to me that some of the information in the executive report was incorrect, and that's what we based our decisions on. If it wasn't for that information, I wouldn't know that the building's not at serious risk of not in any immediate serious risk of further deterioration. So that's what I refuted in my speech. I didn't know. So I suppose what I'm getting at is that I called this in for probably a different reason to what I'm actually sitting here for now. I called it in, probably more on the usage than anything else. But when I then received the condition survey, the quantity surveyor's report, and all the other information, I then realised that some of the other information in the executive report didn't reflect that. So had I have had that information at the beginning, because I know Councillor Ellesmere mentioned that in agreement with him I dismissed certain options in the which we did, but that's because we didn't have this other information, and that's why I kind of said that even my decision wouldn't have been based on sound judgment, because I didn't have the information available to me to come to that decision.
Yeah. Do you disagree with the National Heritage classification of this building being at risk?
No. So
But
because
you
I
just said
that
you do.
So I looked quite some length about how and why buildings are at risk. And it is on the at-risk register for a variety of reasons. My intention, I want to see the money spent to get the building off the at-risk register. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of the information in the executive report leads us to take option 1, which is what was recommended, to do the work immediately, because it states that the building is at serious risk of deterioration, further deterioration. Whereas in the executive summary of the condition survey, it says the opposite. It doesn't say the building's in a good condition, but it specifically says that the building is at no. When I said no immediate risk, that probably means further risk to what it is now. So that, to me, that information, if I'd have known that information then, and other executive members may have known it then, they may not have agreed to option 1, which pretty much stated that the building was at further risk of deterioration, which isn't mentioned in the condition survey, and I have to rely, I know architects, I know surveyor, I know whatever, I have to rely on the professional's opinion.
Colette, you indicated you had another supplement.
Last bit. So, given what you have learned, if this went back to executive, do you think a different decision would be made?
I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the others. I certainly know that some of the things that I said at the executive would be different now. So Councillor Osinger was correct. I dismissed one of the options. I think it was option 3. I can't remember which one it was, but I dismissed it during the course of. I certainly wouldn't have dismissed that option because of the information I've received now. As for the other people in the executive committee, I obviously can't comment on that, but I would have thought that had they have digested the same information as I had done, there is an opportunity that they may have come up with a different idea, but I can only speak for myself, and I certainly, bear in mind I had a different decision to the recommendation anyway, but certainly I have a different viewpoint now with the additional information I've got.
Thank you. Now, I've got 2 speakers, and I think we've really given this an excellent airing, so I'm going to Richard first and then to you.
I just want to get the chronology clear in my head. So we all know it was empty in 1981. It was put on the at-risk register in 1992. The council acquired it in 2016. Mark Hunter then told us the reason for the delay in the survey was because you were waiting for the master plan to happen. What I'm unclear about is why that's changed. So we're told by the officer we're waiting for the master plan to happen, so we wait 2 years before we commission a survey to look into the state of this building. The survey is commissioned in 2018. We then wait another, getting on for 2 years really, before we do anything, and now all of a sudden there's a lot of urgency. What actually has changed between 2016 and 2018 that meant the survey was commissioned? And yeah, what was the basis of that? Because as far as I can tell, there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of talk in the executive minutes, and there's talk now, we've got to get on with this. But I don't understand, if it's such an important building, which I believe it is, why wasn't a survey carried out in 2016?
Are you going to answer that now? David, you wanted to?
Yeah, so I mean, what's changed now is, we've had the survey work done. The longer we leave it, the more likely the building is to deteriorate. I mean, that's just a fact. It's empty. There are problems with it. You can actually see when you're looking at it on the right hand side, it's sagging down a bit, and we don't want to leave it any longer because we take this seriously. So that's number one. The other is that there are a number of buildings at risk in Ipswich. This is the only one owned by the council, and we are constantly putting pressure on other owners to look after their buildings. And I think if we've got a building of our own that we're not looking after, it certainly reduces our moral authority to try and get other owners to do the same. So it is important to us as we try to get owners to take action on their buildings to show that we're doing the same as well. And for no other reason than that, I think we need to get on and do this.
You brought us up.
Clarification. So So we've been told that in 2016 it wasn't felt important to do a survey because we're waiting for the master plan. But now the survey's been done, even though we still haven't got the master plan, I still haven't had an answer to what has changed.
So we have become aware now, as I've indicated, because of the severe contamination in the pool silo, which means we can't do the structural survey work, which means we can't do a master plan, that if we were waiting for all that, then we would still be some significant way away from it. We've got an opportunity to do something with this building. Our belief is, given its historical nature, given its current condition, we ought to get on and do it.
Thank you. Tim?
Yes, it was a question I was going to make, but I would make the point that if someone has been sick for some time and they eventually come to me as a doctor sick, should I make the judgment to leave them sick because they've been sick for some time? But actually the question I was going to ask, this is all a question about judgment, and it's about judgment of executive members, including executive members who make the judgment to bring it to this committee. When that executive member made that judgment, what judgment did he give to the delay in restorative and security works that were going to be necessary to the building, and the consequence of delaying the restorative works that everyone agreed on at that committee meeting, which were in option 1? What was your judgment that it was sound practice to delay the repair work during the most inclement season of the year?
Thank you, Councillor. So, I think I wasn't talking about delaying, and I don't think in any of this, I think I've been quite open that I'm very open to this building getting taken off the at-risk register. And for any work to be undertaken to take this off the at-risk register. Now, when I was at the executive meeting, I didn't know how much that would cost. There is an amount of money detailed in here, and had it been more than what was stated, I was always willing to. I've not called this in because I don't want any money to be spent on the building. I've called it in mainly for the reasons I've outlined. I don't want to see a delay in getting the building off the at-risk register, which is really the works that will be done that will stop any potential deterioration in the future, which is what's stated in this survey. So that's not my intention. My intention isn't to leave it an unspecified amount of time in the state it's in now.
Yes, supplementary.
Yes.
It's an interesting precedent, this, but delay was always the inevitable outcome of referring this process through the scrutiny process. And I would ask you, had you not considered that possibility, because it sounds as if you hadn't, because you didn't intend delay, but actually what you have done is create delay.
It's probably due to other circumstances around us why it was delayed.
Yeah, I mean, usually a call-in is heard within 7 days, and so the delay would have been a week, because we would have had the call-in, and then it would have been either referred back to executive or it wouldn't have been referred back to executive. And all of our jobs, as part is to this call-in function is open to us to allow us to scrutinise decisions. And to be honest, this has been a bigger delay than usual because of obviously the PERDA period. That's something completely out of my control. So I suppose delay wouldn't have come into it when I made the decision to call in this decision, because usually the delay would have only been a matter of a week or two, because the Constitution states that the call-in usually has to take place within 7 days, I believe, of the actual notice coming out. So totally unavoidable, I believe, that the delay has actually been more like perhaps 10 weeks or however many weeks it was ago that the decision was taken.
But the option was there for you to withdraw the call-in once you realised how long the delay was going to introduce.
Yes.
But I've got one last speaker, sorry.
You'll have to actually make a statement now, Dr. Sullivan.
Well, I was just going to pick up on the reply from Ian to Tim, because it's 3 months.
here we are 3 months later. And David's absolutely right. You knew probably sooner than we did that there was going to be a general election. So you could have dealt with this, and we wouldn't have had to be in here this evening. But I do want to draw your attention to page 22, which is the condition survey and what the surveyor said. Because what was clear and what we know regrettably about this site, there has been fires and there has been break-ins in that area of town. We know historically that has been a problem. And what this survey actually stated in there was that though all the windows and external doors are hoarded for security reasons, windows and doors at the rear are blocked up with concrete blocks. 2 separate garden areas have also been hoarded up. And it goes on, and then it talks about that there is a significant risk factor because the building is vacant. There is a significant risk factor. So although you talk about, and I believe you said it executive, and you've hinted at it again this evening, that, you know, well, it's been like this for a while, another, you know, a bit longer wouldn't have made, you know, doesn't make any difference. Tim has made the point quite rightly that we've gone through another winter. The surveyor had quite rightly said that leaving it at risk in this way, there are all sorts of reasons why it could become much worse than it is now and cost this council more than it would. And David has hinted that, has said this evening, that there has been evidence in the last couple of years that there has been deterioration as well on the fabric of the building. So I think it is unfair of you to suggest that it sort of doesn't really matter and you didn't really know that you were going to hold things up, because here we are 3 months later and it could have been dealt with.
Well, if you're going to take that into account, I'll more than happily hold my hands up and take responsibility for the delay in doing anything to get this building off the at-risk register for the last 10 weeks. But you can look to the right of me, or the left if you look from your direction. We've owned this building since 2016. Nothing has been done to get this building off the at-risk register for 3 years. Yes, me calling in this decision has delayed that decision by further time, but we've owned it for 152 weeks, give or take. Have any prior knowledge of when an election is going to be called other than you do, but it's still, you know, my role as leader of the opposition is to scrutinise things that the council do. I've been invited on the executive for one of those reasons, and I can't discharge those duties just because I believe that an election may be called and that might mean a delay. I suppose if it was different, we just bought the building, that might have, I'm not saying it would have done, but it may have given me food for thought as to whether I call it in or not. But to be honest, it never really became in my judgment as to whether I called it in or not as to the delay it would cause, because we'd already owned the building for 3 years without doing anything. So to say now that me calling this in has put this building further at risk jeopardy, well then you can times what I've done by however many multipliers you want, because we've already owned it for years without doing anything. So I don't disagree that me calling in has delayed the work taking place, but I think it's quite disingenuous to then blame me for any extra bad things that might have happened to the building since I announced this call-in, when it has actually been in the same unoccupied, derelict state since 1992.
Colette, it's your question.
Right.
Well, so I'd like to thank everybody for all their questions, and just my observation sitting here, it seems to me that if this executive report had this condition survey attached to it in the first place, we might well have not been here, but that's just my views. In any case, I now come to the position where I ask you, Ian, to sum up.
I think Councillor Ellsworth goes first, doesn't it?
It doesn't say so on my instructions.
It does in the Constitution.
But Shirley is now going to look at the Constitution.
The portfolio holder goes first. Always good when somebody's read the Constitution.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this has been called in supposedly because the executive didn't exercise sound judgment. I think, you know, we've heard here tonight, has anybody in this room actually got any idea what councillor Fisher would like to do. Because he's talked about option 1, which is the only one he doesn't want is the one that we've actually identified. He's talked about option 2, doing minimum works. He's talked about option 3. He's talked about a mythical option 4. I don't even, do nothing. I honestly don't know, and perhaps you can enlighten us in his summing up, exactly what he wants to do. So if there's somebody not exercising sound judgment, I think it's it's certainly not the other members of executive. This has introduced delay, which Councillor Fisher says he doesn't want to do, but then he's also prepared to look at option 3, which would introduce a huge amount of delay before we do anything. I've outlined why executive took the decision that it did. We've got a historic building here, we need to look after it. We could just do the minimal works, but if we're ever going to get it back into use, there's a big list of things that are going to have to be done, whatever the use is. I've said utilities, heating, cabling, heat, sound, asbestos, floors, etc. They're going to be done whatever the use of this building is. It makes far more sense to do them now as one package of work, so we don't have to go out for additional tender work, so we don't have additional cost construction inflation, and let's try and get the building back into a state where it can be used and occupied, and so that we've got a building that we can all be proud of, rather than the boarded up, derelict state that we've got now. Please don't introduce any more delay to this, which is what Councillor Fisher is asking us to do. He's asking us to do this, he's asking us to take this to council before it goes back to executive, knowing that the next council meeting has been cancelled.
Well, I didn't know
So
that.
well, you knew it when you just said what you wanted ONS to do now. You could have said put it back to executive. What you're actually saying is we're not going to take this to council until February, debate that, and then take it back to executive. That's what you just asked ONS to do. It's a nonsense. I think the entire committee can see that what executive are planning is correct, exercising sound judgment. We looked at all the options, it's the right thing to do. Please let us get on and do it.
Thank you. Now, Ian, go to sum up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's disappointing. I find that we have to bring a level of reasonably personal abuse into it, Councillor Ellesmere, but I've tried to remain professional throughout this. There's no doubt in the importance of this building and the future of this building. I think, the discussion around the table says that we all feel that it's got perhaps an important part in the future, as well as the history of our town. And I'm no different to anybody else around this table. Okay, I think this shouldn't be about the future use of this building, and that's why I didn't want it brought up. Didn't really bring it up very much. My opinions on the future use. It's about whether the decisions were given fair consideration. Now, I believe, unless the other members of the executive had seen the condition survey and the architect's report and knew how much the £35,000 cost of taking the building off the at-risk register, then I will say I will withdraw my statement that they made their decision based on sound judgment. But I have to presume that the other members of the executive committee only saw the same paperwork that I did, and that I know I changed my outlook on certain things once I'd seen the additional information. I'm not saying that I will change executive's mind as to what the future outcome of this building is. What I'm asking for is that they reconsider the decision based on the information that we've all had here in front of us. We voted in favour of a recommendation to do all the work immediately, based on erroneous information that the building was at some kind of immediate risk or further immediate risk of deterioration, which it isn't. There's certainly, I agree, Chair, that had the condition survey, the QS report and the information about that Martin Fulcher supplied us being in the executive report, then we probably wouldn't be sitting here now. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have exactly the same opinion, that I wouldn't want it something different to what these guys want, But hey, I sit on the executive, that always happens. I've nearly always got a different opinion to those people. But I think I urge the committee to actually remember what the scope of the call-in is, and that scope doesn't include anywhere what the future use of this building is or isn't, and I don't want it to be an argument about the future use of this building, because we're always going to differ on that. I think it's really important to consider the information that I've imparted of what was missing from the original report, what could have been added in the original report, and what was erroneous in the original report. And also why there's been no explanation. This site, when we first bought it, there was great aspiration for its future. We've probably been an integral part of the whole restoration of that end of the waterfront. But that's just disappeared, and it seems to me that we're looking at just the quickest option to get in a few £1,000s a year for the councillors. Let's not put this into perspective. Turning it into an office, we'll get an annual rent. I can't see you get an annual rent of anything more than £15,000 or £20,000 a year for such a small office space. So we're talking small amounts of money here. But let's not focus on the usage of the building, and let's focus on the scope of the call-in as is written in front of you. Thank you.